Good morning, guys. My name is Aaliyah. Today, I'm going to give you a morning routine.
This black person is not real. Neither is this one, nor this, nor that. Not him, not her, not them. No, 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 nope, nada. Not real. All are AI generated, but since when has racism ever cared about what's real? I want you to think of the most powerful modern weapon that a nation can possess. It's not nukes or tanks or jets or ships or hell, even guns. It's propaganda. Both media and propaganda shape how we interact with politics, both on an individual and global scale. From who and how we fight to what we fear to who we believe deserves power, even what we all choose to ignore. All of that is contextualized by the way we consume media, which is why control over said media has always been central to power. When you control the narrative environment, you control how people interact with the world. And this is something the US mastered by the beginning of the 20th century. After all, how else are you going to maintain your spot as the dominant superpower in the world? Media manipulation is your best friend. The United States has always ran off of two things: white supremacy and capitalism. And they're so intertwined that it's impossible to separate them. The only way to maintain a white supremacist racial hierarchy is reinforcing it with media that supports those narratives. We need to be constantly reminded why these systems are justified. Problem is that black Americans have always fought back against these racist narratives, using the same media weaponized against us. It doesn't matter the format, as long as we're able to produce it, we're not only able to challenge these misrepresentations, but reclaim our stories. For those in power, this is a problem. The last thing you want is for a marginalized group of people to promote counter-narratives and political agency. That's how they gain power. It's why you also must constantly keep your tactics evolving with the times. But how do you do that? With digital media booming, making it more and more accessible for black Americans to educate themselves on their conditions, how do you suppress that? Well, you take advantage of that very same digital boom.
Give me my EBT card back! Excuse me, this was mine and it was the last one. I'ma sue you! Excuse me?
Put that shit back! So you got yourself a 2-piece spicy and left me starving?
This black person is not real. On November 30th, 2022, Ronald Reagan was celebrating from hell. His ultimate dream was finally starting to pay off. OpenAI, a tech company specializing in artificial intelligence, released a public version of ChatGPT 3.5. Using pre-trained language models, users could generate almost any text with a single prompt. And while these AI-based chatbots had existed for many years now, this was the Franz Ferdinand moment that triggered the AI boom. Now you didn't have to think anymore. Anything that once required planning, writing, research, or real human effort could now be plugged into a conversational machine that mimicked human effort on demand. Soon, visual counterparts and image generators start popping up, and before you know it, visual art, music, memes, hell, anything, you name it, could now be mass-produced in a cheap, effortless fashion with no real intention or substance behind it. You see a rise in what we commonly refer to now as AI slop.
It's okay, honey. We'll come back tomorrow.
Fuck that! I need me a number 2 meal now!
But like any slop, eat too much of it, it'll make you sick. You take this content fodder and examine it through our larger media landscape, you see exactly how it spreads to benefit institutions that gain from pumping out harmful narratives. You now have cheap and easy to make content that can be used to reinforce white supremacy. Any racist myth or fantasy that you want to entertain can now be generated visually with a few clicks and spread on social media for people to chew it up and spit it back out. Videos, images, voices, avatars, you can tailor each one of those to confirm existing biases without any need for context or consequence. Before you know it, this low-effort AI slop starts to get treated like real representations of black life. And every time it pops up on timelines, comment sections, thumbnails, they begin to feel a lot less like caricatures and more like reality.
Your breath smell like soy sauce.
Yo, daddy breath smell like probation though. Keep playing.
And this creates a trap. How do you fight back against this? Never mind the fact that these models are becoming more and more powerful and indistinguishable from real humans. How do you combat a new form of digital racism that isn't even pretending to be accountable? Well, that's the least of our problems. What good is combating it if you can't even recognize it?
Go on now, baby. Eat your food. It's good for you.
Fuck no, bitch. I'm tired of eating the same shit every day.
can't get hot Cheetos and Hennessy with my stamps.
Bitch, this ain't the club.
Get your ass out of bed before I smack your face, ugly. How about you get your ass off of Tinder and take care of your family? What the fuck?
In the span of just a few years, these AI models did what 60 years of FBI programs, mass surveillance, podcast equipment, and high sugar foods have failed to do: the complete destruction of Black Americans. Generative AI has become white supremacy's new ultimate weapon. By flooding the media environment with artificial blackness, those in powers no longer need to fight us. They can simply generate safer versions of us instead. With that being said, buckle up, because by the time we finish this video, racism will already have generated a new spooky avatar.
I'm talking about I got high blood pressure, bitch. I've been high my whole life.
As usual, before we get started, let's establish some things. I want to clarify my stance in regards to how I feel about AI, as I feel at times people can be quick to parrot opinions they hear on the internet without really informing themselves or asking why they feel that way. Artificial intelligence as a concept is not inherently bad. In fact, we've used it for decades now. Search algorithms, fraud detection, logistics, automation, all of those are AI. Hell, every time you play against a computer in a video game, that's AI you're playing against. The problem isn't that AI exists, it's how it's used. More so, who controls it and what incentives shape its outputs. Like any technology, AI just reflects the values of the system it's built within. And when those systems are shaped by white supremacy and capitalism, it only ends up being used as a tool to reinforce said systems and punish those of us that live within the margins of society. When most folks, myself included, voice their grievances towards AI, it's usually in regards to ethics. Plagiarism and lack of compensation aside, here you have a tool that's able to fabricate almost any media based on patterns in a dataset. It doesn't understand context or harm, it just gives you what it thinks a human wants to see. And when the data it's trained on comes from a world shaped by unequal racial hierarchies, the outputs only reinforce those same racial hierarchies.
Hell nah. Why the fuck they trying to tell me my food stamps don't work for liquor? I'm about to flip this whole fucking store in a minute.
Once a system can generate entire Black people, representation no longer belongs to us. You no longer need real people, you just need enough quote-unquote data to approximate what we look like. And as we're about to see, this is nothing new. To kick us off, we're gonna go over all the ways the establishment has historically used misinformation in media to reinforce racist narratives, exploring not just how they operate, but what makes them so effective. Looking to get the kids that racist gift just in time for Christmas? Well, look no further. Welcome to Build a Black Workshop. The idea of using misinformation to reinforce racist narratives is nothing new. Long before generative AI became a thing, institutions learned that the most effective way to manufacture consent for racism wasn't to attack Black people directly, but to instead replace us with a controllable version through media, that being the virtual Negro. A Black caricature that could easily be reproduced, stripped of context, and weaponized with little resistance. Luckily, here at Build a Black Workshop, we have a vast selection of virtual Negroes and media portrayals to choose from to fit all your political agendas. Now, there's two steps to producing a virtual Negro, and that's extraction and synthesis. First, we have step 1, extraction. This is the process of isolating Blackness from its historical and political context and breaking it down into nothing but usable parts. To do this, you take specific traits and behaviors and strip them from the material conditions that produce them, so they can then later be redeployed as evidence for narratives that were already decided in advance. The goal is to create a data set without context. Once you separate Blackness from the lived realities that shape it, you're free to cherry pick at any aspect of it as if they are nothing more than inputs. And when I say any aspect, I mean it. Anecdotes, trends, statistics. You can showcase these within the media to support whatever narrative that's required. The earliest examples we have of this are, surprise surprise, the minstrel shows of the early 19th century. You get entire caricatures and performances based on racist exaggerations of Blackness. Writers like Thomas Rice and George Washington Dixon would take over-exaggerated gestures, speech patterns, mannerisms, and present them as the quote-unquote essence of blackness, reducing whole communities to consumable entertainment. Now, it didn't matter if these exaggerations were accurate. What matters is that you can repurpose them to affirm an existing narrative, which we saw. Those exaggerations became what we associate with negative connotations of blackness. White audiences ate that shit up like it was the McRib, and minstrel performances would become a staple of American culture. Some would argue they still are. Jump forward a few decades, you see this pattern continue. Things that can be associated with being black can be isolated, exaggerated, and reframed as innate qualities rather than outcomes of material conditions. You see crime dramas repeatedly frame black characters as innately impulsive, aggressive, or criminal, while simultaneously ignoring the conditions that shape those behaviors. Sitcoms and comedies exaggerate loudness or hypersexuality as if that's inherently black. Is there a black male character? Let's emphasize his innate superior athleticism without realizing how that stereotype is rooted in centuries of pseudoscience. Same thing happens in the news. Black communities get consistently framed through crime and dysfunction, but in a way that makes these conditions appear inherent rather than produced by structural forces. We get crime stats shown without any context. You get sensational headlines that highlight violence. You even see it with the visuals. The dilapidated streets, the boarded up buildings, the graffiti, they repeatedly get paired with stories about black neighborhoods. Now, all of these might look like nothing more than lazy stereotypes, but it's deliberately done. In practice, they're teaching the audience pattern recognition. By stripping these behaviors and outcomes from context, you teach them to associate blackness itself with disorder and danger. These traits then in turn function as a data set. They go to form a visual and behavioral index of what the audience associates with blackness, and it's built through decades of repetition across news, television, film, and social media. You don't need to explicitly identify someone as black because you've already created a visual language that does it for you. That's how extraction works at its core. It strips blackness of any sort of context and then reduces it to isolated traits and statistics. And once you have enough of those fragments, you can now create any caricature of blackness you want. That now brings us to step 2, synthesis. This is when those same extracted traits get reassembled into simplified, easily identifiable archetypes. While step 1 was about cherry picking traits of blackness out of context so they could later be visually and behaviorally associated with blackness, step 2 is more so about narrative construction. Those same isolated traits and behaviors now get molded into simplified black characters that feel both recognizable and narratively complete. I want you to think of the synthesis step as the little instruction booklet in a Lego set. The pieces already exist, but how you arrange them determines what gets built. With those same fragments and pieces of blackness, you can construct countless archetypes. The thug, the comic relief, the athlete, the hustler, the magical Negro, all of them different on the surface, but assembled from the same limited set of parts. And once those traits are locked together, the archetype goes from being something that the audience simply consumes and starts becoming a lens that they actively use. The viewer can now begin interpreting us through that familiar figure they've already learned, and it shapes almost all of their interactions with blackness. How they respond to it, what they support, what they don't like, who they blame, even what forms of violence or neglect they're willing to accept as reasonable. Essentially, for synthesis to be effective, it has to mobilize the audience to act on that racist narrative. And once again, we can look throughout history to see how this operates. In 1915, you get D.W. Griffith's silent film, The Birth of a Nation. Genuinely one of the most effective pieces of racist propaganda that was ever put on screen. It took already existing racist stereotypes and assembled them into a coherent moral narrative with a clear takeaway. The black men in the film get synthesized into a singular archetype. Violent brutes and sexual predators completely incapable of self-rule, while white violence was framed as defensive, righteous, and necessary. I mean, look at the poor, defenseless white woman. How is she going to defend herself from this demonic black brute? The audience already knows to associate those black figures with danger due to the extraction from step 1. This is perfect. By the time the Ku Klux Klan rides in as the film's heroes in the final act, prompt, the audience has already been primed to see that response as logical. The archetype has done its job. You just successfully painted racial terror like it was a restoration of order. And we know this worked because it mobilized people in real life. The film directly aided the resurgence of the KKK. You also saw a rise in lynchings and other forms of anti-black violence across numerous counties nationwide. It even had presidential support. But most of all, it supplied a narrative where joining the KKK felt like common sense. Allow me to make a comparison. Remember when Superman came out last summer and folks left the theater feeling hopeful and wanting to be kind? Well, it's 1915 and Superman hasn't been created yet, so I want you to imagine your kid telling you he wants to be a Klansman instead. But let's jump ahead to the late 20th century. We now have cable news perfecting the formula. The war on drugs was deliberately framed as a moral panic rather than a government campaign against poor black communities. It took archetypes, the crack fiend, super predator, the gangbanger, and used them to render poor black neighborhoods as zones of inherent danger and chaos. But because the archetype did its job, any sort of context wasn't necessary. Viewers recognized that figure and understood what was being implied. Just like how Birth of a Nation used caricatures to mobilize white violence and political action, cable news used these same synthesized black figures to manufacture consent for anti-black legislation. Every time you see a late-night special report, it mobilized audiences to support policies that targeted black communities. Policing, surveillance, mass incarceration, crime bills. Hell, if the caricature is good enough, you'll even see those same black communities support the legislation themselves. All you need is that big black boogeyman for everyone to rally behind. By the time we get to the digital age, the audience already knows all the archetypes, only now they rely on short-form content to trigger recognition rather than outright explanation. A title, thumbnail, clip, that's more than enough. The audience is already familiar. You see it constantly on platforms like YouTube with the whole body cam footage genre. You can take a single freeze frame or a moment mid-conflict and then package it as proof for racism. Viewers don't need to ask what happened before the camera turned on or what the context is, because the archetype already supplies the story in advance.
Why you walking up the officer?
When you see the commotion happening on screen, your brain automatically fills in the rest. The same thing happens with all these reaction channels that funnel out quote-unquote black fatigue and all these other forms of anti-black content. The viewer clicks off the video thinking, this is why nobody likes black people, look at how you guys act. Those archetypes are doing all the work in justifying racist narratives without ever needing to argue for them directly. It then mobilizes them in real life, which we saw in real time in late 2025. The Trump administration spent months spreading misinformation about crime rates in urban black neighborhoods, specifically DC, Portland, and my hometown Chicago, despite none of these even being in the top 10 most violent cities, and the crime that is present usually due to insular gang-related activities. But this didn't stop them from using social media to paint the narrative that these cities were being overrun by violent thugs and gangs of criminals. Remember that super predator archetype from the 90s we talked about? Well, y'all just call them YNs nowadays. This misinformation wasn't even just limited to black Americans. We saw them come for the entire diaspora. They attacked Haitian Americans, accusing them of eating cats. They attacked Somali Americans, using the Minnesota fraud allegations as ammunition to attack an entire demographic of people. They carefully synthesized archetypes that garnered public consent for racist action. And it worked. We saw how it mobilized both the public and the government in real time, and how social media parroted these same anti-black talking points. Now, while the general public is mostly in disagreement with these policies in the present, whether or not they approve in the long run is irrelevant. In that moment, they did exactly what they were trained to do as an audience. And phase 2 is simple. You take the same cherry-picked traits from phase 1 and assemble them into a repeatable, recognizable archetype. And once the audience becomes trained to see those archetypes as natural and self-explanatory, you can mobilize entire groups of people into supporting racist narratives. Combine the two together, and you've got yourself a virtual Negro. But what happens to this process when generative AI enters the picture? Well, it's simple. It takes that same machine and cranks the dial all the way to fucking 100. See, the process of creating a virtual Negro used to be carefully curated through a variety of different media formats, but now you can automate it and effortlessly pump them out in mass. These generative AI models are trained on the very decontextualized media patterns we just outlined. The isolated crime data, the over-exaggerated media portrayals, the sensational depictions of blackness. An AI system doesn't care if these are true or not, all it sees are patterns. And those same patterns are used by it to regurgitate racist narratives. And this is not some unfounded conspiracy theory either. Even the software companies themselves admit it. Both OpenAI and independent researchers have openly acknowledged that their models absorb racial bias from their training data, including the tendency to associate blackness with crime or negative behavior, because that's what dominates the internet and the media they're trained on. The research confirms that other language models implicitly associate negative stereotypes with features of AAVE, assigning more negative descriptors and biased judgments even when race is not explicitly stated. The same goes for all these image generators. Research confirms that these text-to-image systems have significant racial and gender biases in what images they produce. When you give them a prompt that has harmful or biased terms, the generated images frequently display racial stereotypes.
Want to prank your friend? Make it look like they were caught on a fake hidden camera scene in a cosmetic store.
They disproportionately portray black individuals in violent or stigmatized situations, and there's little to no safety filtering or refusal mechanisms built within them.
Man, stop the car. I see one of them dudes that ate my lunchable in class last week. Let me out. He got me messed up, twin.
You serious right now?
Dead serious.
The YN, coming 2020.
Another study on Stable Diffusion shows that all of these images containing stereotypes, they're typically generated with significantly darker skin tones. Even on a larger scale, research shows that these commercial AI systems consistently misidentified black faces at much higher rates than non-black and white ones. When your data is racially biased, all of your outputs will be too. Like we said, all AI is doing is making the process more efficient. So by the time we get to the synthesis phase, the archetypes no longer need to be manually constructed. Blackness has become an easily producible asset. Feed a prompt into one of these language models or image generators and watch it spit out a fully formed archetype that you can use for any story. It hits all the exact same markers that traditional synthesis does. And if anything, the fact that so much of digital media nowadays relies on short form content makes it even easier to spread. This stuff caters to low attention spans and folks looking for easy, instant answers and gratification. If you have someone that already has a preconceived bias regarding blackness, AI is just going to make it 1,000 times easier to get to folks like them. Take YouTube and TikTok for example. The same body cam footage and reaction content is already primed to fit familiar archetypes, but now add AI generated thumbnails or AI edited mugshots to make it easier to produce new clips that hit all the same emotional triggers. Better yet, let's create entire body cam videos that are 100% AI, from the script all the way down to the visuals.
Back from the entrance, lower your voice, you're causing a disturbance.
What exactly am I doing that qualifies as disorderly
You're
conduct?
refusing a lawful order. Move, now.
I'm not.
The officer's voice cut through the morning air sharp and rehearsed as if he had said the same words 100 times before.
You don't even have to limit yourself to just body cams. You want a video of black women acting like fools in public?
I gotta make 6 to-go plates for my 6 kids. Dead ass. And I know I still got money on my EBT, bitch. Am I here trying to be me, huh? Same nails, same Girl, that's my look. Nobody copy you. I've been had this bop. You better stop wearing better. You can't even get your ass. Give me my EBT card back.
Excuse me, this was mine and it was the last one.
I'ma sue you.
Excuse me?
Or black parents abusing their children?
You better not cry. Don't you let one tear fall, hear me? Straighten that face. I said straighten it.
I'm hood mama. Don't make me come up to that school again. I fight parents too.
Or black men acting like violent savages? You can now make a dozen of these within the span of an hour. Hell, you can even give them matching colors like they're the fucking Wiggles. I want to go back to the National Guard deployments we talked about earlier. Not even 2 months later, we get the recent surge of ICE raids happening in Minneapolis, which are still ongoing at the time of this video's recording and release. Around the same time the video of Renee Good's murder began to make tractions and spread on social media, you see a surge in the amount of AI-generated videos of protesters violently attacking ICE agents.
You think you can stand here and scare us? Huh?
You're not protecting anyone. You're the problem. Look at me when I'm talking to you. What are you gonna do, tough?
Now, nobody stopped to check the validity of these videos or where they even came from. Everybody was just focused on how it made them feel. You had a wicked agency that was already looking for ways to justify their evil actions and take the heat off of them, and now they have a digital tool that gives them exactly what they need.
Look at me when I'm talking to you. What are you gonna do, tough guy? You gonna hide behind that mask? Say something. Say something. Yeah, that's what I said. My eyes!
Maybe we need to shoot more protesters. I mean, just look at all of these videos of ICE agents being brutalized. Surely a few more bullets won't hurt. Surely a few more $1 billion of funding won't hurt. Like we said, viewers don't need context. They see the figure, recognize the pattern, and then supply the narrative themselves. Add AI into the mix and you just gave people a way to do it faster than they ever thought they could. And just like that, my friend, you have successfully mastered the art of building a virtual Negro. You now know how blackness gets stripped down into raw, decontextualized fragments, and then how to reassemble those fragments into familiar, usable archetypes. And now that you've seen how those archetypes stop just being characters and start functioning as tools for mobilization, you're ready to throw a little AI into the mix to really bring out that racist flavor. Bon appetit. While the virtual Negro is arguably the most effective way to use misinformation to reinforce racist narratives, it's just one tool in the toolbox. Hell, if anything, it's just the key needed to unlock bigger, scarier tools. What if I told you that there's tools so deep in that chest that you can't even begin to imagine what they look like, let alone how they even function? What if those very AI models that spread misinformation were so deeply embedded in our day-to-day lives that we didn't even realize they're weaponized against us? Don't worry, unlike this section, the next one isn't going to be teaching you about how to avoid the trap. We've already been caught in it.
You're an investor in AI. You're deeply invested in Palantir, in military technology, in technologies of surveillance, in technologies of warfare, and so on, right? And it just seems to me that when you tell me a story about the Antichrist coming to power and using the fear of technological change to sort of impose order on the world, I feel like that Antichrist would maybe be using the tools that you were building, right? Like, wouldn't the Antichrist be like, great, you know, we're not going to have any more technological progress, but I really like what Palantir has done. Wouldn't that be the irony of history would be that the man publicly worrying about the Antichrist accidentally hastens his or her arrival?
I used to hate having to wipe my own ass, but now I ask Grok to do it for me. Hey Grok, wipe my own ass for me, and make it look like a Studio Ghibli movie too.
Congratulations, you've earned a promotion. You truly are one of the brightest assets the CIA has to offer. Your disdain for black people impressed all the department heads. Now, I don't know about you, but I think you're ready for the big boy job.
Earlier, we showed how to manufacture consent for racism. How, through the virtual Negro model, media trains audiences to recognize and promote racist narratives without ever having to name them. Now, with the addition of all these generative AI-based models, it's easier than ever before. But in doing so, it's also setting a stage. See, once you have public consent for racism, the next step is to bake all that AI-driven racism into infrastructure. You now have a chance to embed it into the very systems that control everyday life. And once you reach that point, you start to see the real vision. The virtual Negro is not just some weapon that trains people to be racist. It's the blueprint for how to run a racist, AI-driven society. The end goal is to create a state governed by AI-driven risk assessment. I want you to picture entire industries: policing, healthcare, housing, finance, education, all those being filtered through AI models that assist someone's behavior as well as predict their future decisions. Already this shit sounds like a nightmare scenario, but that's not the worst part. You add race into the conversation and you get Ronald Reagan's wet dream. An AI-ran dystopia where algorithms deliberately fed with misinformation create a racist hellscape for Black Americans. These systems base all their assumptions and conclusions on the data they're trained on, and when you've already modeled blackness as dangerous and undesirable, those ideas translate right over into coded variables. An entire nation is able to offload centuries worth of systemic racism into software and then pass it off as efficiency. Scariest part is, our government is already in the precursor stages of doing so. That infrastructure is already being built piece by piece under the guise of innovation and cost cutting. So to help you visualize the gravity of this, we're going to explore the main implications of this, specifically how they target us as Black Americans. First things first is that it upscales systemic racism. Now, what gives systemic racism its power to begin with is the fact that it doesn't rely on individual beliefs or bias to function. That power comes from those biases being embedded into the structures themselves. Policies, laws, incentives, institutions, and they remain regardless of who's operating. You see this in every sector of society. In healthcare, we have higher maternal mortality rates, delayed diagnosis, and routine undertreatment. Compound this with underfunded hospitals within predominantly Black communities and medical bias that's been normalized for generations. In housing, you've got decades of redlining, appraisal bias, and discriminatory lending that concentrated Black families into undervalued neighborhoods and simultaneously cut off wealth and stability while framing it as quote-unquote market behavior. And in education, Black students get funneled into under-resourced schools while being disciplined more harshly and trekked into lower academic paths, with these outcomes usually being blamed on students' lack of desire to learn rather than intentionally designed factors. AI then takes these already racialized outcomes and translates them into predictions, and it does this through proxies. You see, these systems don't need to explicitly say race, instead they rely on trained variables that stand in for race. All of our work from the virtual Negro is finally starting to pay off. Say you have certain zip codes shaped by redlining or high insurance rates relating to areas of disinvestment, or you have crime stats due to a neighborhood being over-policed. These inputs are treated by the AI as neutral, and once those variables enter the model, the system begins learning correlations, and those correlations are then used to make assessments. Who's likely to cost more? Who's likely to fail more? Who's a bigger risk? Or even worse, who's likely to be quote-unquote non-compliant? In healthcare, the algorithms get trained on utilization and spending data. Because Black patients have historically received less care, even when equally sick, the model learns to associate that lower spending with lower need. The system's picking up on and detecting past neglect and treating it as if it's reliable data. In housing, those same algorithms take decades of lending decisions, eviction records, and income inequality to make their decisions. And mind you, these datasets all reflect exclusion by design, but once they get encoded, it gets reframed as an indicator of risk. Again, the AI isn't explicitly discriminating, it just sees instability. But when that instability is based on deliberately biased data, it becomes justification for housing denial and more inequality. Let's even look at education. You feed the AI discipline data, attendance records, test scores, all of which are shaped by racial bias, and the model then absorbs those disparities and converts them into more predictions. Now you know who's likely to drop out, who needs to get disciplined harder. Let's allocate less funding to these schools. Our data predicts they're less likely to graduate anyway. You just got away with upgrading decades of racist policies by giving it a technological justification. But these AI systems also allow for the state to better crack down and punish resistance. The only thing more dangerous than dissent is when dissent is organized. Those shared grievances can now become weaponized by turning them into collective action. And this is something the state's always known. Black resistance is a security risk. We saw this with the FBI's COINTELPRO in the 60s and 70s, but even today with the DHS and NSA when they surveil and target Black organizers. Anything that staunchly opposes white supremacy and capitalism gets framed as a criminal threat. But with an AI-driven defense system, you don't even have to sit around and wait for resistance to announce itself. Dissent is still a pattern at the end of the day, and all patterns can be detected early. Take those same risk management systems systems we talked about earlier and use them for defense. Police records, location history, political affiliations, what media you consume, what do you interact with online, what organizations you join. You Googled ways to get active in your community? You can now flag anyone who is statistically likely to speak out against the state. Mind you, this already has been happening for decades, but you now have a more data-driven justification to flag those individuals. And once someone gets flagged, you open them up to whatever countermeasures you feel are necessary. It can be harsher surveillance, increased patrols, more traffic stops, decreased mobility, anything needed to silence and disarm resistance. You can collect data much easier and make charges stick by sheer proximity alone. And the real advantage to all of this is that it gives you complete deniability. After all, everything you're doing is backed up by data. You're merely optimizing public safety. There's no such thing as repression. But on the same hand, you can also preempt revolutionary movements before they even have a chance to spring up. Everything you did to punish dissent on an individual level still carries on over into collective organizing. And if you make the cost of participation too high, you can completely discourage people from even entertaining the idea of organizing against the system. Or else they face a chain reaction of surveillance and legal pressure. They already know where to look. You've got entire black communities that are already over-policed and under-resourced. And all this does is translate into patterns that can make entire neighborhoods ripe for the picking. Any sort of revolutionary potential can now be quietly snuffed out one person at a time. Now, all of these may sound like hypotheticals or some crazy leftist fanfiction, but no, these are real systems and tools already being implemented by institutions. And surprise, surprise, they already disproportionately affect black folks. Police departments are using algorithms to analyze historical crime data and forecast where crimes might occur or who might commit them. Programs like PredPol, ShotSpotter, and Geolytica are already being used by large police forces like the LAPD, CPD, and NYPD.
ShotSpotter has changed all that. By utilizing advanced technology honed over 2 decades, we have automated the process. We monitor gunfire activity 24/7. So if a gun is fired in any area within ShotSpotter coverage, the system detects, locates, and immediately alerts police of the gunshot.
They're using data already skewed by decades of over-policing as quote-unquote evidence for these shady surveillance programs. We see the same with facial recognition technology. A Washington Post investigation found police across at least 12 different US states have made arrests based on facial recognition matches without independent evidence, with one man spending over a year in jail before his name was finally cleared. Once again, much to everyone's surprise, most of the wrongfully arrested individuals were black.
Robert Williams was wrongfully arrested after the Detroit Police Department's facial recognition software falsely matched his driver's license photo to security footage of a shoplifter. Williams and his attorney described the interrogation where they learned of this to Newsy's sister station, WXYZ.
He flips another piece of paper and says, well, I guess that's not you either. And that's when I guess I offended him, because I held the paper up like this and said, I hope you don't think all black people look alike. Right? So I believe that's when he told me by flipping the third paper, so the computer got it wrong.
That was the moment that we all learned that facial recognition technology was used to identify and falsely identify my client for a crime he didn't commit.
Clearwater, DataWorks Plus, Mobile Fortify, these are all biometric companies contracting and lending their services to federal and state law enforcement agencies. We even see it making its way into the courtroom. Algorithms like Compass are being used in court to assess a defendant's likelihood of reoffending. It influenced decisions in their bail, their sentencing, even their parole decisions. Spoiler alert, but what do you think this is doing to black people? It results in higher scores for black defendants and leads to longer sentences and reduced parole opportunities. Again, these aren't being influenced on case specifics, but on patterns the algorithm extracted from racially skewed data. But let's say you're one of the quote-unquote good ones. I stay out of trouble, so I don't have to worry about the police. Those same algorithms run other aspects of society. Lenders assess where you've lived in the past and how policed that neighborhood is. Automated tenant screening tools by landlords have been shown to deny housing to voucher holders because they treat housing vouchers as a sign of risk, thus disproportionately harming mostly black applicants. Even when we do everything right, the model still sees us as a statistic. In healthcare, it's the same thing. Systems like Optum and NH are used to prioritize who gets care and rehab support. When the inputs reflect real inequalities in access, it's no surprise that the outputs effectively learn to reproduce those same inequalities. In education, you get AI assistants like Magic School and Google Gemini that focus on behavioral intervention and IEP support. It ends up putting black students into punishment-based tracks, often without teachers or administrators even realizing the biases are baked into the very software that they rely on. Mind you, none of this is explicit discrimination, it's all backed up by data. Just like we said, you don't need to explicitly target blackness, you do it via proxy. It doesn't matter the field or the sector, this is no longer a hypothetical. It's already here. We're in the early stages of an algocracy. While the term algocracy is still mostly conceptual, it's far from science fiction. Here we have the idea of a government that uses computer algorithms to take over the burdens of governance. People's entire lives, their families' lives, all of that governed by automated systems that judge and determine their worth in society. But when you stop to examine what that would look like in real life, it's kind of hard not to ask. Do we not already live in an algocracy, or at least not the very early stages of one? Now, your government is never going to explicitly tell you that it is, the same way a fascist government isn't going to explicitly tell you it's fascist. But the writing's already on the wall. The goal is to get as close to one as the public will consent to, as quietly as possible, while still maintaining the illusion that we have a say-so. Every time you allow a new system to quote-unquote optimize a public service, or every time a new AI tool gets added into policing, or welfare, or the courts, or schools, hell, every time you make a fucking Ghibli-style portrait of yourself, every time a new bill passes that hands over power to an algorithm, we move one step closer. And mind you, it didn't do any of this through force. There was no threats or violence or none of that. It did this through sheer convenience. You've allowed AI to make life easier for you, and look what it cost you. But it's not hard to see why those in power would favor an algocracy. At its core function, it perfects this nation's biggest engines, that being white supremacy and capitalism. On one hand, it preserves racist outcomes while maintaining a sense of deniability. See, traditional systemic racism requires visible actors to justify it, whereas algorithmic racism only needs data. On the other hand, it perfects capitalism by turning human life into an optimization problem. It takes all the human needs like healthcare and housing and whatnot, things you're entitled to as a human being, and treats them like bets. If the system thinks you'll be profitable or quote-unquote low risk, then you get support. If it thinks you won't, well then, I mean, you can always just die. This entire video, I've been putting heavy emphasis on the word risk, and that's because we know what it means. Risk is just another stand-in for race. Best part is, nobody has to say that part out loud. The data does all that for you. It really goes all the way back to what we stated at the very beginning of this video. How media and propaganda are the greatest weapons a society can ever own. And when you use it to spread misinformation, or trick people into surrendering their rights by convincing them that it's innovation, you can unleash new levels of racism onto black people that this nation's founding fathers could have only dreamed of. All these new generative AI models might be the final form of said media weapon, but best believe, had it existed decades ago, they wouldn't hesitate to use it against us. If anything, this is just all of their hard work finally paying off. The culmination of decades worth of media manipulation, racist policy making, hyper-surveillance, and data collection. And at the very end of it all sits the final factor that helped seal the deal: our consent. But all of this still leaves us with the final question: where do we go from here? For as much time as we just spent identifying all the signs of approaching an algocracy, what steps can actually be taken to avoid it? Or even worse, if we're already here in one, how the hell do we get out? I'm afraid this time around, you can't just turn off the screen and unplug.
Hey, I'm made using generative AI, and I'm gonna have a big world-shattering announcement to announce soon.
Uh-huh.
Humans are really cooked with this next breakthrough, coming soon.
It feels like the hype never ends with you.
I want to apologize in advance if my voice sounds a little nasally in this last section. I've had a cold now for like the past 3 weeks, and this, I don't know, this shit is just not letting up. So, turns out that going into incognito mode and smashing your screen with a fucking hammer won't magically make the shady generative AI programs that spy on you and collect your data magically go away. Who would have thought? Bad sarcasm aside, this video's conclusion was the hardest section to write, and that's because in spite of all the research that went into this topic, I wasn't able to come to any concrete solutions. When it comes to combating an algocracy, simply trying to get the AI to go away isn't gonna cut it, and that's because, well, you can't. It's impossible to make generative AI quote-unquote go away in a traditional sense, and that's mainly because of two things. The first is the fact that it's already been institutionalized. When you look at generative AI from only a pop culture lens, it's easy to write it off as a fad or some little trendy experiment that you can boycott into being irrelevant, but it's already been integrated into government infrastructure and public life. Once it's embedded at that level, you're now fighting the institutions themselves and not just some tool that they've implemented. It's also why telling people just don't use it is such a weak response, because at the end of the day, you don't get to just opt out of systems that decide your housing, healthcare, and education. Now, let's be clear, that doesn't mean you should be using these tools. You shouldn't, but understand it's gonna take more than just telling folks not to use them, because even if you never touch or support a company that uses generative AI, best believe those same AI systems are touching you and collecting your data. Institutionalization just means that those AI models no longer need your participation to operate. All they need is your data, which they already have. But the second reason why you can't just make it disappear is a little deeper, and that's because it's thriving in an era of anti-intellectualism. We're living in a moment where any sort of complexity or expertise on a subject matter is treated like elitism or being smug. You know, it's not that deep. You can't even attempt to engage in any sort of critical analysis without some disingenuous, bad-faith jackass labeling it as pretentious just because he may or may not have the same analysis as you. Mind you, this didn't come out of nowhere. You've got public education being gutted left and right, you've got history being flat out removed and erased, and we see entire mediums of entertainment being replaced with short-form brain rot that doesn't do shit but keep your attention span hooked just long enough for the next round of anger and colors to pop onto the screen. Too many people aren't interested in how or why something works the way it does. They just want a hot and ready final product on their plate that makes them feel good. And all of that is the base requirement for AI, and best believe, this is all by design. If you train a population to rely on shortcuts and dismiss critical thinking, they're going to be far less likely to criticize how power dynamics are shifting behind the scenes. After all, the less people who understand how these mechanics work, the easier it is to rearrange them without a whole lot of pushback, or at least until it's too late. It truly is the digital equivalent of the McPick 2. On one hand, you can further gut working class power, while on the other hand, you've got a tool that convinces those same workers that their power being gutted is making their lives quote unquote easier. The scariest part about all this is most of the general public didn't start seeing the red flags until we got to this stage. Now that all these systems are already integrated, we have the task of not only trying to identify all of them, if we can that is, and then trying to uproot and remove them. So again, I want to reiterate, when we say you can't get rid of AI in a traditional sense, it doesn't mean that we should just sit down, give up, and let the billionaires win. No, that's flat out ridiculous. I've always hated that it's over, we're so cooked bullshit. Cut that shit out. Most of us don't have the luxury of just giving up and saying it's over. All it means is that we have to be much more planned and coordinated when we fight it. That's not some easy fix you can just outline in a YouTube video, and if we're going to combat this, it's going to take years of serious, carefully targeted organizing, specifically through direct action. When your elected officials continue to fail you time and time again, the only way to fix things is to do it yourself, and you do so by coordinating with your community and engaging in economic disruption. See, the thing about economic warfare is that it allows you to strangle the pockets of the institutions and pressure them into conceding into your community's demands. In today's social media age, whenever folks hear terms like boycott or strike, they usually imagine a symbolic gesture. You know, a hashtag, a few angry consumers refusing to buy something for a week and then going right back to normal. that's not effective. Real economic disruption involves a structured, disciplined effort. Let's take both the Montgomery bus boycott and the Memphis sanitation strikes as an example. Our highly sanitized media nowadays likes to depict these as a bunch of passive black folks who one day got sick and tired and decided not to ride the bus out of frustration. You know, that'll show those white folks. And then the white segregationists magically had a change of heart. That's more disrespectful than anything because it never focuses on how these were meticulously coordinated. These lasted months, and in the case of the Montgomery operation, up to a year. If you take a look at the playbook all these orgs followed, they focused their energy on one specific target. They weren't trying to dismantle the entire system at once. That wasn't practical. They didn't have nearly as many resources as the state, which is why the resources they did have went towards starving the economy one leg at a time. On top of that, the organizers still had to provide alternative methods to the boycotted services. In order to make sure your community stays disciplined, you still have to provide communal care. It truly took an all hands on deck effort to damn near cripple the southern economy and force lawmakers into conceding. And these aren't the only ones. We saw it with Trans-Africa and their campaign to get universities to divest from apartheid South Africa, same as the Delano grape strikes led by United Farm Workers. We have historical proof that it works. Only problem is the digital age takes many of the roadblocks and barriers that came with economic warfare and doubles down on them. Let's go back to what we just touched on earlier as far as the digital age relying on shortcuts and instant gratification. The same way that social media is one of our greatest strengths when it comes to organizing, it's also one of our biggest weaknesses. You see, earlier campaigns operated in tighter media ecosystems. You had fewer platforms and the news cycles weren't 24/7. On top of that, most organizers were physically embedded in those neighborhoods. You actually had to go outside and talk to your neighbors. But nowadays, these platforms are designed to steer your attention towards outrage. What will get you as an audience member riled up as much as possible, but also what will get you to move on to the next outrageous topic just as quickly. These algorithms and feeds reward novelty and virtue signaling rather than real steps to get people onto the streets, because it's a lot easier to let people feel like they're doing the right thing so they don't actually have to break their comfort. And this is how you get folks under the misconception that boycotts can be accomplished in a single week, or that if we're loud enough, then somehow that anger will magically translate into dollar signs and legislation. For a boycott to truly be successful, it has to outlast the news cycle and can't cave into symbolic feel-good gestures that shift your attention to what's deemed to be the latest issue. But in addition to our media landscape, the economy has evolved as well. In decades prior, many of these targets were geographically concentrated. You know, you had a transit system in one city, or a regional agricultural supply chain, or a few commercial downtown districts. They were all revenue dependent on a specific local population. But today, major AI institutions are multinational. Their revenue streams are diversified across different continents and sectors. It's much more difficult to cut off one specific flow of revenue when they're bringing in just as much money from other sources. Like we said, you can't just up and boycott anything. You have to plan how that target is going to affect the larger system. If a company's revenue isn't meaningfully affected, then leadership isn't going to bulge. It makes you wonder, if economic disruption fails to get them to listen, then what will? No, but in all seriousness, another key way to disrupt these AI systems is to stop these data centers from being built. A lot of folks that use AI aren't really aware of what it takes in real life to generate these prompts. A lot of them are being processed by massive data centers that rely on stupid amounts of electricity and power to run on. Power that's, in case you didn't know, coming from your community. If you pay attention, majority of these data centers are being built in low-income, predominantly black and rural communities. Last year in 2025, these companies spent roughly $580 billion on the approval, planning, and construction of these sites. Unsurprisingly, the money that these things bring in the companies isn't flowing back into the community. It's doing the exact opposite and sucking them dry like a vampire. When one of these data centers gets built, it raises the cost of electricity for the entire area. A report by Essence showed that neighborhoods in New Jersey, Georgia, and Maryland saw their electricity bills increase despite residents cutting back and using less electricity. That's because of grid sharing. These centers affect the overall supply cost. So even if you aren't using as much electricity, you're still paying more for a data center you didn't consent to. On top of that, it's literally poisoning neighborhoods. The Southern Environmental Law Center did an investigation of Elon Musk's XAI centers in Boxtown, Memphis. The $20 billion site is used to power systems like Grok, but in the process, the 30 methane-powered turbines used to generate electricity have released large amounts of formaldehyde and other volatile organic compounds in the air, overall decreasing the air quality, with some residents even developing asthma.
Mr. Knox lives 2 miles away. You smelled it?
Yes, Lord.
Right away?
I sure did. Well, after they got situated, I started smelling it.
Knox lives in Boxtown, a mostly black, low-income neighborhood in South Memphis.
The health department, they need to be ashamed.
Where industry has taken a toll for generations.
There's a lot of people out here who got medical problems like breathing issues.
Cancer risks here are 4 times higher than the national average. Cancer killed her father and other relatives, Knox tells us. Life expectancy here is 9 years less than the national average.
But what's most ironic about these vampiric data centers is how, despite all the quote-unquote innovation that they're supposed to be bringing us, they're not generating enough jobs for the community to sustain themselves. The ratio of resources being consumed outweighs any sort of meaningful economic growth. All we're doing is paying for another rich person's toys. So another way to economically disrupt these AI systems is to organize within your neighborhood around the shared goal of halting these sites' construction. Before they're even built, they still have to go through a lengthy zoning and approval process, which usually ends with city council members voting yes. Don't let the lobbying and bribes fool you. Those council members are still your public servants. They answer to you. All across the nation, grassroots organizers are combating the construction of these sites. We saw successful campaigns in Georgia, Kansas, Kentucky, Tennessee, New Jersey, Ohio. These are small local communities fighting to push for legislation stopping the process, or in some cases, at least gaining a moratorium to delay the construction. We've got the same thing going on in Oklahoma, Texas, Illinois. To all my Chicago people listening, they're actively planning on building one on the south side, right off the Stevenson. Same with you, Chicago. There's a whole ongoing plan to gentrify the South Shore. We need all hands on deck if we're going to be able to fight these centers. Signatures, phone calls, emails, whatever it takes to put more pressure on them. All you "I don't do politics" folks, you need to shut up and get in the streets, because best believe politics is doing you right now. You don't care about politics, but you care about your electricity and taxes going up. But it all goes back to that weaponized media system that we live under. Before this AI boom and bubble even became a thing, we've been trained to think ever since we were little that every time capitalism commodifies something or slashes jobs for profit, it's somehow innovation, or that it's gonna make our lives easier so that we have time to innovate some more. It's the biggest marketing gimmick these ghouls ever came up with. There's nothing innovative about generative AI models. It's not making art and filmmaking more accessible or music. It's not helping you do better research. And it's damn sure not helping you become a better writer. They want you to conflate speed with innovation. If something takes less time, then it must be an advancement, but all you're doing is diminishing that artistic process itself. That sense of mastery that comes with actually crafting something and bettering your skills doesn't matter anymore, because, well, all that really matters is the final product. Look how effortlessly I was able to create this. This would have taken a human weeks. These tech bro giants don't care about integrity. All they see is dollar signs. Them wanting to innovate and make life easier is just them looking for new ways to have to pay you less. So ask yourself, since when has a billionaire ever tried to make your life truly easier? Human-made art and literature and labor has always existed and thrived under a variety of different eras and economic systems, and it's not going to go anywhere. We'll continue to support human ingenuity as long as we as humans are still on this earth. But understand that this current mess that we're in didn't happen overnight. This was a carefully crafted plan that's been slowly cooking in the oven for years, and all of the media we've been consuming along the way has been used in the recipe. Now, how we choose to take that mess out of the oven depends on where we decide to start. But just know, that time is limited. And if we don't start sooner or later, there might not even be an oven to open. Or worse, we won't know who's in the kitchen.
Turns out that God really doesn't have that much of a problem with racism. He doesn't even remember slavery, except in February. Personally, I hate black people, Ruckus. That's why I did everything I could to make their lives miserable. Crack? Me. AIDS? Me. Reaganomics? Come on, I'm in the name. And God has rewarded me, because God loves white people. And if you teach everyone on earth to love the white man, you too can join us in white heaven.